Test for Auditory Comprehension of Language, Edition 3, otherwise known as the TACL-3, written by Elizabeth Carroll Woolfolk in 1999 and published by ProEd. What is the TACL-3 and who is it meant for? The TACL-3 was constructed to measure receptive spoken grammar and syntax through an auditory comprehension task. This test assesses auditory comprehension of word classes, word relations, grammatical morphemes, and elaborated sentence constructions. The TACL-3 identifies children with receptive language disorders from ages 3 years and 0 months to 9 years and 11 months. The test can also be implemented in the identification process, intervention planning, early diagnosis, to monitor progress, and for research. The TACL-3 was normed on a standardization sample of 1,002 children. Characteristics of normative sample were relative to the socioeconomic factors, ethnicity, gender, disability, and other critical variables that were estimated for the year of 2000 by the U.S. Bureau of Census. The test manual includes factors such as gender, geography regions, racial and ethnic characteristics, the location such as urban and rural areas, educational attainment of the parents, and the cognitive status of the children. New validity studies were conducted showing that the test is valid for a wide variety of subgroups as well as for the general population. Studies to identify gender, disability, racial or ethnic bias were conducted and appropriate modifications were made. Reliability coefficients were computed for subgroups of the normative sample as well as for the entire normative group. The third edition of this test was re-evaluated using differential analysis as well as conventional item analysis to determine good items and to eliminate potentially biased items. The examiner's manual includes a more comprehensive discussion of the construct, content, and predictive validity, the test and retest reliability, the internal consistency, as well as the interjudge reliability of the TACL-3. The test authors provide important guidelines when undergoing the administration of the TACL-3. First, it is advised to administer the entire test in a quiet, comfortable, and non-distracting environment, as the test could take up to 20 to 30 minutes long. Additionally, the examiner should sit behind the child to observe and record their pointing processes. The examiner should administer the subtests in the order in which they appear, and should begin every subtest with the first item. The examiner should introduce each stimulus item with the phrase, "show me." One of the 3 pictures for each item will correctly illustrate the meaning of the word, morpheme, or syntactic structure being tested, while the other 2 pictures portray either 2 semantic or grammatical contrasts of stimulus being tested. The examiner should read the stimulus aloud, and the subject is then directed to point to the picture that best represents the meaning of the word, phrase, or sentence spoken by the examiner. Uniform ceilings are used for each of the 3 subtests, and it is advised to discontinue the test when the child misses 3 items in succession. The test authors also discourage prompting or using comments that portray the accuracy of the child's response, such as "very good." The TACL-3 is comprised of 3 different subtests. The first subtest is Category 1, Vocabulary. This section uses the most common meaning of word classes, such as nouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs. The vocab section aims to include words that represent the most basic percepts and concepts. The second subtest is Category 2, Grammatical Morphemes. This section tests the meaning of grammatical morphemes and uses them in the context of simple sentences. An example of a stimulus that would be on this section is the examiner reading, "The girl is jumping." The last category is elaborated phrases and sentences. This section tests the understanding of the child's syntactically based word relations, elaborated phrases, and sentence constructions. These types of elaborated phrases include interrogative sentences, negative sentences, active and passive voice, direct and indirect object, embedded sentences, as well as test the knowledge of WH questions and yes-no questions. The TACL-3 yields raw scores, and the test manual shows how to convert these raw scores into age equivalents. Percentile ranks are also provided and are generated for each subtest. The subtest standard scores are also converted from raw scores, and guidelines are provided in the test manual for interpreting these standard scores. The age equivalents for the TACL-3 are thought of as language ages in the context of the test. These scores are found by calculating the average normative group score at each 6-month age interval. The test manual also lists these age equivalents for TACL-3 subtests raw scores. Examiner competence is a key aspect in successfully administering this test. The test examiner should first and foremost study the content of the test manual and ask a colleague about any information they may not understand. Additionally, examiners should have extensive training in the assessment, score interpretation, and general procedures about test administration. It is also advised that an examiner undergo supervised practice in administering and interpreting the test. Results from the TACL-3 are useful findings that may be the foundation for designing an. It's important to remember that test results do not diagnose. Although the test results may help contribute to the selection of long-term educational goals, they should not be used as the basis for planning day-to-day instructional programs for individual children. Instead, test results should be followed up with extensive clinical teaching, criterion reference testing, and informal assessment procedures. One caution that examiners should be aware of is that the length of the test may interfere with the children's attention span, as it is 30 minutes long. Towards the end of testing, a child could get very antsy or restless and may lose focus on the task. Additionally, some pictures may not be a child's prototype of that object, such as pictures of animals, dogs, or cats, and it may account for skewed measures.